Hello and welcome to the Irish Fire Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Houghton. I'm an entrepreneur, investor, and financial independence enthusiast, sharing my financial freedom journey. Stay tuned and welcome aboard. We're going to be exploring something that I get a lot of questions on, so I'm looking forward to answering it. It's around the notion of, should I be paying off my debt or my mortgage, or should I look to invest? So yeah, as I said, I get this question many times, and I think sometimes there's a little bit of confusion around the best way to handle it. And truthfully, there is no perfect answer here, and it's all going to come down to your own tolerance for risk when it comes to investing, your age, and also just your own investing experience, right? And I'm only going to tackle one side of this. There is a third option, which is a pension route. So I'm not going to tackle this in this episode. So the first thing is, traditionally I've recommended the path of, if it's debt and the interest rate is over, say, 5%, get that cleared off. You certainly want to prioritize that. And I'm going to give you a tip at the end of this episode about something that I'm doing to make yourself feel good as you pay off that debt. So I'm going to come back to that. If you have a low interest mortgage and you're contemplating what to do, whether you should invest or pay down that mortgage, my traditional advice has been to invest. As I said, I've had a blog about this where I basically advised invest as much as you can into cash flowing assets and then use the profit from those assets to pay off your mortgage payment. In August, I had a profit from my investments of €580. So that was literally cash in hand, €580 coming in before tax. And let's assume that the tax rate on that is going to be about a third. So that leaves me with roughly €400. My mortgage payment is €320 per month. So effectively my investments have covered my mortgage. And that was with an investment pot of around 60,000. But of that, only about 40,000 of that was actually from the cash flowing assets. So it's very much a situation here where you could say, right, rather than worrying about trying to be mortgage free, how about I build my investment portfolio up to a point where my cash flowing investments actually pay for my mortgage. And at that point, hey presto, you may as well be mortgage free because you're no longer working and selling your time to pay for your mortgage. Now I can appreciate that if your mortgage is in the €1,500 range, that this may not be as simple, but I am using a very simple example, and again I'm showing the benefit of having that low cost mortgage, which has certainly helped us on our financial independence journey. So what are the other options? I have mentioned on the podcast before that a couple of years ago we were looking to buy a new house and we decided not to. And actually last summer we made the decision to add on an extension. And it was an interesting time because we did have the money, but we didn't want to touch our investments. And it was kind of lucky because at the time that was when I was stuck in some of my scam investments that I didn't realize were scam investments at the time. So it could have really gone belly up from that point of view. So I'm kind of grateful that it didn't, or at least I got out before it did. And at the time, we basically had 3 decisions to face when it came to trying to pay for this extension. So the total extension cost was about €20,000. The first option was to basically sell some investments that we had and get the cash that way. So at the time, we had about €12,000, I think, in personal investments. So we could have sold that and maybe just hustled the rest, or found that money through some means. So there was the option to actually kind of pay cash and basically sell those investments and put us back from that point of view. And I didn't want to do that at the time because I was kind of obsessed with growing this investment portfolio. But I'm going to come back on this in a second. The second option was to draw the money out of my company through wages. And the problem with this is, to do that it was going to cost me $40,000 because half of that was going to go to the tax man when I did that. So yes, I had the money there. Again, I was going to have to sell investments through the company, but I decided that that was going to be no good either because it was just such a massive tax bill to pay. And this is a strange thing in the society that we live, that I chose option 3, which was to actually borrow the money from the bank. So rather than pay tax, it was cheaper to actually borrow the money from the bank. I mean, the interest that I was going to pay on that loan over 4.5 years was €3,000. That is significantly less than the €20,000 in tax that I would pay. Now, I'm now paying that loan off through the lower tax rate of 19%. So it isn't a case where it's not like I'm paying the money off with tax-free money. But you can see the point. I've effectively saved 30% of the tax bill there by taking the loan. But the problem I have now is, yes, I've got this great investment portfolio, but I've still got debt to pay, right? I've got a repayment of that of about €450 per month, and the interest rate is about 6.1%. So when it comes to the higher rate of interest, it doesn't make so much sense to not be trying to pay that loan off quicker. Now, certainly if this was credit card debt or something really, really high, obviously it's a no-brainer, pay that debt down. When it's 6%, that basically means I really need to be earning an investment of at least 12% per year to kind of cover that. And there's no guarantee when it comes to trying to get 12% a year, right? Like even in peer-to-peer lending, you can have a loan go bad or there can be late payments and so on. So there isn't any guarantee, and then you're still paying tax on that, and then you're kind of left, and it's much of a muchness at the end if you're actually breaking even or not. So if you're in a situation where you are like I am and you're not sure what to do, I'm going to throw this suggestion out there because I finally worked this out this week and I've since started implementing it. I have issued a loan to myself. It is the safest investment that I could ever make. It is guaranteed and it is tax-free. I have issued the loan to myself from my investment portfolio. And what I mean by that is I've started making extra payments from some of my investments that I've had. So I just stopped auto-investing in some peer-to-peer loans and that started accumulating a few extra €100. I took that money out and I made some extra payments onto my extension loan. I added those extra payments into my portfolio. I've just put it in the peer-to-peer lending asset class for now. It should probably go into bonds if I had bonds, because that's effectively what it is. And by the way, governments do this, right? So the US government will issue a bond to borrow from their social security, and that's basically how they can rob the nest egg of all the retirees' money to use that money now. And it's basically a promise to pay back, or an IOU if you like, right? So this happens every single day of the week. This is nothing new. So there's no reason why this shouldn't be an unusual concept. And effectively what I've done here is I've added those extra payments to my investment portfolio, and I've started charging myself interest on those, right? So the interest rate is at 6% per year or 0.5% per month, right? And the idea is that eventually I am going to have paid off that Bank of Ireland loan, and that would be great. I'll no longer owe them any money, but I will owe myself that money through my investment portfolio, and I will be charging myself interest on that. So effectively what I'll do is I'll then take that €450 per month that I'm currently paying, and it is a promise to myself that I will add that back to my investment portfolio plus interest, right? So I will just continue to pay that €450 extra into my investment portfolio, and finally, through time, pay back that bond, if you like, back down to zero. At that point, as that money gets added to my investment portfolio, I will simply invest that money into my other assets. So it's actually having no real impact on the bottom line. My investment portfolio is untouched in the sense that it's not a case where it's suddenly going to be massively reduced because I'm paying back a personal loan. I'm actually promising myself that I'm going to pay that back, adding it to my investment portfolio because I'm actually effectively saving myself from saving interest that I would otherwise have to pay through the Bank of Ireland loan. It's tax-free because it's not income related, it's just literally me paying off a debt. And it's guaranteed for at least as long as I'm alive and working, in the sense that I'm making that promise to myself. This is me basically borrowing money off the future self, if you like. Because the money's there, I don't want to touch my investment portfolio in the sense of I don't want to see it be decreased. So I am actually literally borrowing money from my investment portfolio to myself. And this is one of the great freedoms that having an investment portfolio gives you. I think I mentioned in the last episode that we had a situation where we didn't want to draw down from our investment portfolio to get through the month of August, which is an extremely expensive month. Well, in the end, I actually sat down and looked at the numbers, and even though we had saved a bit of money here and there, we basically had to take some from the investment portfolio. So we ended up taking about €800 out just to get through the month. And I'm still on track anyway for the year, so it's something that could be done. And I had a couple of good months with some of the managed forex traders that I use. So it was a case where the money was there, and I did it. And it immediately overnight took us from a stressful situation to, okay, we can relax now. And this is one of the great benefits of having an investment portfolio. So in the case of this, if you're in a situation where you're going, look, I would really like to pay off my mortgage because psychologically that's going to make me feel great, then consider doing this. Consider actually making the extra repayments, adding them to your investment portfolio, charging yourself interest, just keep a track of it on a spreadsheet, and promise yourself that at some point you're going to pay that back. And the idea is, once you've paid off your mortgage or whatever debt it is, you're simply moving the payment that you used to make on the borrowed money and starting to pay down the actual bond that you've given yourself. So effectively you'll find that you'll pay off the debt sooner, obviously, because you're making extra repayments, and now you're simply going to move that payment that you normally make and start paying down your own loan that you've taken against your investments. It's as simple as that. The last point I want to touch on with all of this stuff: don't commit 100% of your money to pay off your debt or your mortgage. Still think of it as a diversified portfolio. And what I mean by that is, if you just commit to paying off the debt and doing nothing more than that in regards to investments, you're not going to learn anything. It's no good to you, because by the time you've actually paid off the debt and you're ready to invest that money, you're starting from ground zero then. So commit to something like this. Pay off 80, 90% of the debt by all means. But take the 10 or 20% and start investing that money. I don't care if it's 50 euros to Mintos or 50 euros in an S&P 500 somewhere. At least you're learning something and getting feedback. You're creating risk tolerance. It actually is irrelevant how much money you put into investments early on, because it's still going to seem scary and new at first anyway. It's a matter of actually making a start there, so that by the time that you actually start moving those payments that you're currently putting onto the debt to your investment portfolio, you know what you're doing with it. Because otherwise, you could lose it all because you invest in something stupid, you've got no idea what you're doing, so you just chicken out and you don't end up paying it back. There's so many scenarios where you're going to have blockers when that loan is eventually paid off. It's the 3 golden rules. 1, start tracking your expenses. 2, start looking at ways to increase your income. 3, start looking at what you could be investing in. That's pretty much what we've covered in all of the episodes so far. And if you notice, all of them will have that as the underlying theme. And I'm going to continue to touch on this stuff because there's still so much more to cover. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you're a big fan of the show, why not become an Irish Fire Podcast member for free? Members receive access to inside information that isn't shared on the podcast, as well as regular updates such as the monthly newsletter. To become a member, visit www.firepodcast.ie.